welcome to the Sticky Thoughts podcast. Here we talk about thoughts that stuck to us. We get honest, we get curious, and we try not to spiral, but no promises. We are your hosts. This is Kajal Singh.
And this is Smriti Kamath, and on this podcast, we are showing up not as psychologists, but as friends who are also psychologists.
Yes. And today I want to talk about people using humor as a coping mechanism.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Okay, okay,
This thought came to me. So I've been consuming a lot of stand-up comedy. I've been going to physical comedy shows, and I've been watching lots of videos since over 2 years now. So I just realized
okay.
how many comedians talk about therapy and things that they discuss in therapy and
Mm.
therapists. So I thought, why not? We could also talk about them. How about that?
Flip the script on them.
Yes, Uno reverse, right at. But I really admire how comedians and also people you meet sometimes use humor as a coping mechanism when they're struggling with something or when they want to talk about something vulnerable, they'll wrap it up with a cute joke or something so that the message is sent ki, oh, I'm feeling this way, but also it's kept light-hearted. I think there is something that we could, explore. What do you think, Smriti?
This whole episode is just going to feel like an attack to me. But how do you feel is your experience with using humor as a coping mechanism? Do you feel like you do it at all?
Do I use humor? I very sadly and boringly don't use a lot of humor when I'm feeling vulnerable, actually. I'm very weird with my feelings. I don't use humor. But I know a lot of people that do use humor. One of the people that I know very closely is, of course, you, Smriti. You act so weirdly, all chirpy and funny on the days that you're feeling low. It's it's so telling, but it's at least I think it's better than isolating.
Oh, that's actually very kind. That's a very kind and nice way to look at it. I don't think I usually look at it that way. But I was gonna say that I don't think you not doing that is weird. I think that I really admire that about you. One of the things I admire about you because I think that you are just more okay with being vulnerable. I see you take that breath where you are about to say something vulnerable. You just take a second, you breathe, and then you just say the vulnerable thing. And that is just not what's coming from my end at all. I have to make it a whole set if I'm talking about something unfortunate
Yeah.
where I laugh at least 6 times. And I think it's a kind way to look at it where it's definitely better than isolating and not talking about it at all. So that is some good perspective. But yeah, I think maybe it's a little bit more. Actually, I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about it. Is it actually uncommon for people to? Do you think more people use humor, or do you think more people do not use humor to cope as of now? What do you think?
Hmm.
What do you think is more common?
I think I would say that it's fairly common. People using
Mm.
humor as a coping mechanism. A lot of people use isolation, they use sometimes, anger, displacement, etc. I don't I don't think I want to say that more than 50% of the people, the world population uses humor, but a lot of them do. I think the distinction we could make here is that how it works for a lot of them when you're using humor for maybe, because maybe something vulnerable happened just now and you maybe don't know how to deal with it and you are figuring your space, and when you know that you're comfortable with humor, when you know that you're comfortable with jokes, and it's maybe a conversation between you and your friend, and then you bring it up in a sort of funny way, but just so that you are letting the person know, but also you don't want to get all vulnerable, or you don't want
Hmm.
to get all conversational about it. You don't want to have a proper conversation. You just want the other person to know.
Hmm.
Then how it is, it can be really helpful for the moment. But maybe also this other set of people who only use humor and they never come back to
Hmm.
it. They are never willing
Hmm.
to have also a conversation about it.
I think that's true. I mean, I think that's a very important distinction where you either use humor to go deeper into the conversation or the topic or your vulnerability, or you use it as an escape. So that's one thing. I mean, you also see clients using humor in session. And one of the main things about how we see that or how we are supposed to read that humor or like, understand that humor is also if are they making a joke about it to lighten the air and then go deeper into what they're talking about, or are they making a joke to distract from it altogether? For example, I'm using humor. Am I using this humor to shut the thing down? Like, for example, you brought something up that
Hmm.
I am very uncomfortable talking about. It's making me feel really vulnerable. Am I gonna make a joke about it to kind of shut the thing down and be like, yeah, there's nothing to talk about here, and make a joke about it and completely distract from the topic? Or am I making a joke about it and being like, yeah, I'm really sad, ha? So I think that's two ways where people do use humor, where one of them is a little bit more constructive than the other, because in one of the things you're just avoiding it, and the other one you're trying to ease yourself into it, I guess.
Yes, could be a starting point for a lot of people, which is good.
Hmm.
Which is good. It could be a
Hmm.
starting point for a lot of people. It could also help a lot of people compartmentalize for the moment, maybe if it's not comfortable for them to be talking about the intense thing right now, because maybe of the situation, the scenario, because of the people that they are around. That makes sense. It is a helpful tool here. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you. If it is used to avoid your feelings, to avoid how your body is trying to talk to you, then maybe
Hmm.
hmm, do something
I
about
think that it's still, yeah, and I think that it's still this avoidance, I feel like exists on the spectrum where, on the one hand, of course, you're not talking about your feelings at all, you're never getting to it, you are just making a joke to
it.
distract from it altogether, which I would kind of see as completely avoiding the thing.
Yeah.
But, and on the other hand, you are using humor, but you're kind of, how you're trying to set a boundary, you're having a serious conversation, but you
Mm,
don't want it to feel so serious because that's not gonna be actually constructive to whoever you're communicating whatever to. For example, I want to tell you that something you did hurt me a little bit.
mm,
And maybe if I'm like, okay, Kajal, what you did yesterday really hurt my feelings.
mm,
And I feel like this just sounds normal. I'm gonna try to think of an example where conveys what I'm trying to say. But it's like, yeah, Kajal, you really, I feel like we have these kind of conversations, so I can't really picture that with you. I think I think we have serious conversations. I can't think of an example with you. But I think a lot of times there are some people who do not have maybe the bandwidth or capacity to have a very serious conversation where it kind of almost feels like an attack to them, or it might feel too unnatural or too not normal and feeling like you are making the situation too serious, and it might in those dynamics complicate it more or make it more bad, the whole situation, but
mm,
now they're just feeling bad that you're talking to them like that. So I feel like in that situation, using a little bit of humor to lighten the air and still get your point across,
mm,
where you're saying the same thing, conveying the same thing, you're not minimizing what you're saying, the impact it's having on you, but at the same time, you're saying it in a way that they're not going to feel too defensive about, or they're also going to be okay with. I feel like even in between where you are using humor and, like you said, using it to connect rather than isolate completely, I think we're still there's still avoidance of truly sitting with your feelings, truly letting yourself be with that, letting yourself express that, letting other people see it. And that is when true connection really happens, is when I am letting you see the vulnerable emotion that I am feeling instead of being all haha about it. But at the same time, of course, it's that's why it's a spectrum, because at the same time, at least I am letting you know what's going on, but I'm also not letting you see it. So that's like halfway there.
Yeah. So from what you said now, Smriti, I think it makes me wonder if people who use humor to deal with their difficult emotions, if they're using it because they are uncomfortable being directly vulnerable, or if it is that they are trying to veil their vulnerability in humor because the other person might be uncomfortable. And also if these two things are mutually exclusive.
I think that that's a very good question and a very interesting point, because I think the other end of the spectrum I talked about,
Hmm.
where people are trying to lighten the air.
Yeah.
I think from that example, it's a little bit more about other people. And I think in the most constructive sense of using humor as a coping mechanism, I would picture that, where you are using humor as a coping mechanism, but as a bridge, not to avoid your feelings, but to bridge the gap to the other person. Because communication is also actually working when you are communicating something and the other person is also receiving it. So sometimes I think it makes sense to navigate that situation in a way that it would work. So I think that shows a lot of adaptability in you trying to lighten the air, get your point across, making sure the person is able to take the message as you are trying to convey it.
Yeah.
Of course, the whole burden of that should not be on one person. Of course, they should also try to meet you halfway. But yeah, when that's the case, I think I see it in a more sense of doing it for other people. And I think these two things definitely do not need to be mutually exclusive. Maybe they can exist together, but the middle ground that I spoke about, not the middle ground, but the middle of the spectrum I spoke about, it feels comes from more of a place of trying to protect yourself from your vulnerable feelings. Then it's more about how you are making it easier for you to open up than for the other person to receive it.
That makes so much sense. I want to talk about how smart it is for people who have processed their feelings, who have processed things that have happened to them with them. And then, after they've processed and after they feel comfortable around it, they sort of still use it to make money, as in for the comedians. I'm talking about comedians because it's so smart. Because humor, I think, is so beautiful. It connects you to your audience so beautifully. And like how you said, when you use humor in order to make a bridge between your audience or the people that you're trying to connect with and yourself, that's really healthy and smart. Trying to convey your vulnerability, you are trying to convey sensitive topics across without making it too intense, without putting them
Mhm.
up on the spot to respond or to cater to you. And instead, you're just giving the information across, and then they can take their time, and maybe if they find themselves available to be able to handle the situation, then they have a conversation, or if they're not feeling it, they just laugh about it and leave.
I feel like the laugh about it and leave part would be like a failed conversation attempt if I'm actually trying to convey something to you and then you do not take it seriously at all. That's why I also said that the whole burden can't be on one person. I am trying from my end to make it lighter for you to absorb. But then it's also on the other person to take a step forward and also try to still enter that vulnerable common ground and meet me halfway. Because otherwise it's still not going to be effective. I'm still not going to have conveyed my point, and I'm going to feel more misunderstood. And I think in those moments when you know that the other person might not meet you halfway is when you would also have to step it up more. And I think in those instances, if you know that the other person is not gonna take you seriously or not might just laugh it off, I think those are moments where you are kind of also shielding yourself from the creating the light-hearted atmosphere, because if you're giving them a choice to kind of laugh at it and walk away, it's also like you maybe presented it in that way so that if they laugh at it and walk away, then you can tell yourself that, yeah, I mean, I said it in a light-hearted way. So I didn't convey it seriously, so they didn't take it seriously. I think in those situations, it's better to it's even you go even further down the line of the spectrum where you're not using humor maybe or using way less humor where it's not that lighthearted anymore and you are being assertive so that you can still communicate what you have to because it's necessary in that context for the other person to take you seriously or understand the weight of the situation.
So there are so many things that we need to consider, or maybe that we unconsciously or consciously consider while using humor as a coping mechanism. I think we consider the intensity of the situation, we consider our relationship with the person that we are trying to convey it to, and then also circumstances it is conveyed in. All of those things come into the picture. I think the situation that you are talking about is something where I am trying to communicate directly something to you, and I'm also expecting you to meet me right there. Maybe
Hmm.
because the situation is somehow related to the person that I'm talking to immediately. So I am thinking about scenarios where the person that I'm communicating my feelings to in the humorous manner that I am directly affects the both of us. And I'm expecting the other person to meet me.
Hmm.
Those are the circumstances where I think clarity would help if that is my way to communicate my feelings. And I'm using a little bit of humor, but also a little clear communication. And if I
Yeah.
using clear communication there, then yeah, then maybe we need to reconsider.
Really important to consider your dynamics with the person.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because if you know this person has time and again not taken you seriously or would just laugh it off, maybe there's a chance that they might laugh it off and not take you seriously, then you know that that approach is not going to work with them. But with somebody that I'm really close to, who
Mm.
I know undoubtedly is going to take me seriously no matter how I say it,
Mm.
then I don't need to make the conversation a lot heavier. Like, for example, even though we do have these serious conversations and we might not use a lot of humor here and there, I mean, I can't say we. I do use humor anyway when I'm talking about myself. But in the sense of us, I
Mm.
feel like we also have those conversations seriously when it's necessary. But I feel like here and there, for smaller things, I feel like you might say something jokingly and I say something jokingly. This is a comment in a funny way, and the point gets across, and you get the seriousness of it. But I don't need to make the whole room like this very serious place to be like, Kajal, when you did not pay attention to me and you looked at your phone, that hurt my feelings. I don't need to do that. I can just be like, phone kya dekh rahi hai be?
Dulling the lights and everything and making the room all.
Yeah, yeah. Shine that investigator ka spotlight on your
Yes.
head.
Yep.
How dare you look at your phone while you are talking to me, Kajal? Do
Oops.
you not see me right in front of you?
Yeah. If we had to get more specific in the areas that we use humor as a coping mechanism, could be to wheel our anger at times. I mostly thought of feeling my sadness or maybe disappointment into humor, but there's also anger a lot of times.
I mean, the same example that I just talked about is also, if you're looking at your phone, anger might not be the only emotion that's coming to me.
Hmm.
Like I mentioned feeling hurt, but that might not be the only thing. I'm also feeling pissed because I'm like, why is she doing this for the 500 million time? So I could be angry about that, but I still am conveying it in a funny way. Of course, this is a very tiny example. This can also happen in bigger situations, especially in a lot of conflict situations. Humor actually helps a lot to lighten the air. So, Therapy Jeff, he does couples counseling. So, and he makes reels.
Shout out to Jeff.
Shout out Therapy Jeff. I came across this reel of his where he's talking about this thing called a rescue attempt in the middle of conflict situations. Now, this is in couples, but I feel like somewhere it can be applicable to any relationships and fights of any kind if you broaden your lens. In the conflict, what usually indicates the conflict being carried out in a healthy way is mostly a rescue attempt, which is maybe a chance to connect with the other person in the middle of the fight. Now, this can be in various forms, but one of these examples is using humor, like an inside joke you both have, or make throwing in a reference that's gonna make the other person laugh. Humor is one way you can connect in that conflict situation with the other person, where you are again grounding the conversation back, kind of reminding the other person of the relationship. And not letting the conflict get in the middle of you like a barrier. Of course, there's also other ways of connecting, like he mentioned, maybe putting your hand on their hand, a reminder that the connection is still there. I'm trying to connect to you, sort of a thing. But yeah, humor is one great way of doing that. I feel also because you just throw in a joke, you throw in a reference, make the other person laugh, and all of a sudden you kind of still bonding in that moment of conflict, which can be really helpful and not make you both want to kill each other.
I don't think it is generalizable to all conflict situations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I personally would get offended if I am in this very serious conflict situation with my friend or somebody I'm close to, and they are trying to lighten the situation by throwing in a joke. I would be furious ki this is a situation that's too serious
Hmm.
for us to be laughing. I want both of us to be crying, yelling, taking long pauses.
Throwing things at each other.
No, no. Not throwing things at each other, but maybe throwing things around. Oops.
Okay. Wow. All right.
No, 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 that was a joke.
Yeah, of
Not
course, of course.
throwing
I
things
should have
at
played
all.
it.
I can think of many scenarios where I would not appreciate humor
Hmm.
in between a conflict situation. I would.
Do you think you would prefer it in romantic situations?
So I had this client actually. So this client struggles with emotion expression and she does use humor and she also struggles with feeling safe around people to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
So she was in this conflict with her husband and so they were having a tiny fight about something kitchen related and the husband tried to make the situation lighter by cracking a joke. And she said it was very funny but I went into the kitchen and I controlled my laughter because I did not want to lighten the situation. I wanted it to be serious. So I went into the kitchen and I laughed it out there, but I did not show him that I was laughing. And I came back and I continued the fight because I did not want to lighten the situation because she had only just started feeling emotionally safe to be angry. She was feeling angry. She wanted to express anger and she wanted to talk about it and maybe resolve it, not resolve it at the moment, but she wanted to stay in that feeling instead of oof, taking a break. She did not want to take a break.
Hmm. That's very interesting. I do see where that's coming from, but it's also again taking me back to humor either being used to avoid or to go deeper, you know? So I'm kind of intrigued or interested about how the husband, like what joke he cracked, and if the intention was to get back into what they were talking about or to distract from it. Like, because that's also one way humor can be used, which I would not advocate for. Where you are having a serious conversation, somebody makes a joke, and then you kind of move away from the conflict altogether. You're like, okay, yeah, we're laughing now, so we're good, so we don't need to get back into it. I feel like in that situation, you're using humor to distract from the whole conflict itself. You're not talking about things. But if you're using humor and then coming back, I would see it as like the source of connection. So I am interested about like how what the intention was there, how humor was being used. But if it was not the husband's intention to completely distract from the conversation altogether, then I would in this situation, maybe because the person is still just feeling comfortable opening up. It's a very vulnerable space. but that it's still a connection attempt at the end of it. And maybe later on, when she feels more emotionally safe to have these conversations, it would actually be helpful that connecting humor sort of a thing. This situation also reminds me of how it's also important that even in conflict situations, we consider the other person, how they respond to humor, how they see humor, if they're comfortable with it, how comfortable are they with it, which topics are sensitive to them. So maybe I should not joke about it. So, like, for example, since I know you don't really heavily rely on humor in a serious, like actual serious conversation that we are having, I would not bring up humor in a way to connect. I might not do that because, or if I am using humor, it won't be in a constructive sense. It would probably be because I am feeling vulnerable and I want to lighten it out for me. But it won't be as a connection attempt with you because I know that you wouldn't respond well to it. It's also important for me to see who I'm using humor with. And it would be bad on my part, or not the smartest on my part, to use it with a person who I know it would maybe hurt. But if I know that humor would work for them also, then I can use it with them.
Makes sense. I think this brings me back to my thought that humor is good to initiate a conversation around vulnerable things instead of using it all the way. I also want to talk about using humor. No, that is not in coping. I was going to say ki using humor to convey your emotions and your opinions to groups, which was bringing
Hmm.
back to stand-up comedy and when they talk about politics, things that they are mad about with the government or with relationship situations with the world, things that going around. Is that coping or is that clear communication?
I think in sense of stand-up comedy, even when you were talking about it, something that came to me again is the sense of how they're using it. Because there are stand-up comedians who are now also going to therapy. They also joke about the therapy process. And in that way, they are kind of constructively talking about it, where they are actually also working on it. And they're also using it and getting that back and let's go. But on the other hand, makes me think about some stand-up comedians. I can't really think of examples, but I know that there would also be stand-up comedians who are maybe not really dealing with it, maybe not actually trying to address it, but they're joking about it, which might be a sad experience, is what makes me think about it. I am taking all of my vulnerable moments. I'm not actually addressing them because I'm probably really emotionally already feeling unsafe to do that by myself. And I'm taking all of these vulnerable feelings and making fun of them for a group of people to laugh at and not actually have a conversation with me because of course your audience is just going to relate to you or laugh it out and then move on, but you are still there with your vulnerable feelings and now you have a group of people who is laughing along with you, but then nobody to address it. It makes me feel like if I was in that place, I would feel a little bit sad. On the other hand, of course, if you are also going to therapy and you're also addressing these feelings as well as joking about them, not necessarily through therapy, but at all, I think that is best case scenario. And that way, you are not airing out your sadness for other people to laugh at, and then you are just feeling bad about it, probably. I don't know. It would feel like an isolating experience to me if I am not able to actually address it with people, but I also have people laughing at it.
I think it just hit me. I can think of comedians who have or are in the process of understanding their feelings or understanding their experiences and also sharing it with us along the way. And of comedians who actually joke about their experiences but still have not processed it or
Hmm.
in the attempt of processing it. And it's
Hmm.
so weird that you can tell.
Yeah, you kind of can tell. I can't think of an example because I'm not a very avid stand-up comedy watcher, at least at the moment. But I know I've felt it. You can kind of see the difference in a way. The way they talk about it, how they're talking about it, the kind of jokes they're making, what the punchline is. You can kind of tell. And nobody's gonna think about it that way, right? Like, I mean, nobody's actually going to sit with that because when you are watching stand-up comedy, of course, you're just trying to have a laugh. You are consuming that as a piece of content.
Hmm.
So you're just going to experience that. And as opposed to maybe, for example, other ways of putting your sadness out there in the form of content, like maybe sad songs. So people are listening to these sad songs and they're also feeling sad. So it's kind of like some form of resonance that people are relating to you in a sad way. You are expressing your sadness in a sad way in a sad song. They're also feeling sad listening to the sad song. But here you're taking your sad feelings, putting it out there for people to laugh at, and they're just laughing at it and not really questioning it. Obviously, because why would they? They're just here to consume the comedy. And then they move on with their life, and then it's just kind of like people just laughed at my feelings.
And then you are still left alone with your feeling because that is not processing.
Hmm.
Because again, you
Yeah.
started something, but then you also have to,
Yeah, but it's not going anywhere. Hmm.
yeah, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we should conclude on that note. What do you think is the stickiest thought for you from this episode?
I think the stickiest thought for me would be the last part that you articulated, how few comedians who have not maybe processed their feelings but are sharing their experiences in a comic, humorous manner, maybe in an attempt to connect with the audience and also be lucrative about it. But at the end of it, they might still be left alone to process their experiences on their own because this is not processing and it is not going to lead anywhere because they are still going to have to process it themselves. I think it's very
Hmm.
oof. I think it's going to stay with me.
Hmm.
What about you, Smriti?
Uh, I think for me, stickiest thought was the example you gave about her going in the kitchen and laughing it out and coming back because it's so difficult for her to emotionally feel safe enough to put herself out there. And when she's doing that, she does not want to laugh it out and, reduce the seriousness of the situation. And I feel like that really made me think about how it's really important to basically know your audience. Don't make that joke if it's gonna hurt the other person or they're not gonna be on the same page. And I think that also, thinking about it now, it also brought me back to earlier in this episode when I was trying to make that example of conveying a point seriously versus in a lighthearted manner. And as an example, I just took you and I tried to say something to you in a more serious versus lighthearted manner. And then I couldn't say the serious part because I realized that that's just how I talk to you. And fitting that in with humor not really working for you, like it's not as a connecting agent for you. So I realized that, yeah, I just speak to you. It's not actually an example. This would be the constructive way of me talking to you, and I already do that. So that made me realize, yeah, I wouldn't do that. And if I even do use humor with you, it's usually for my own sake. Apart from the tiny examples that we talked about, where it's like lightheartedly pointing out something. But apart from that, me using humor would be in my defense, or like me protecting my emotions, and it won't be to that. And even that, I need to ensure that it's not hurtful in a way, that I'm directing these jokes towards me and not towards you, so that, of course, it does not end up in something bad. And if it does, it would be my bad, and I can't be like, oh, yeah, you can't take a joke. So it drove the point home that even when you are using humor to connect, it's really important to see the context and what they feel sensitive about. Do they feel good about humor and all of that before using it? So I think that's the stickiest thought for me.
Awesome. So that brings us to the end of this episode. Do let us know what stuck with you from this episode and share your thoughts in the comments, in our DMs.
DMs.
Yes, we love to hear from you. And thank you. This is us signing off. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Take care. I hope you have a nice weekend.
Ah.
Bye bye.